Greetings, everyone. This is Ishmeet, Rahul, and Simran, and this is our demonstration for Project Component 4. We have developed the web servlet using Java and an Android mobile app for the Sleepy Hollow company. We have used Android Studio and have used Java as the backend language. We had two parts to this project. The first one was making the server pages, and later we used those server pages in the development of our Android application. So we'll be going over the mobile client application we created, and this mobile application has about six main activities. So let's go ahead and see the code for the main activity one. The main activity one has two text views and a login button. The find view by ID converts our text view and button XML component to a Java object. We get our string from the API using the request give function. We pass in two strings, the username and the password, and we also pass the URL and a string request. There is an if condition that checks the result and if there is a valid username or password. If there is a valid name or username or password, it takes an intent object to jump our page from main activity 1 to main activity 2. We start this intent afterwards using the start activity function. Else, if the result does not contain the string yes, it displays an error message using the toast.makeTest function. Once we are out of the if and else condition, we add the queue to the request. Handing it over to Simran to explain the main activity 2 page.
Moving on to our main activity 2. This is our interface for it. We have used three text view buttons. The first one that is on the top just represents the string welcome back. The second one displays the name of the employee that we're looking the records for. The third one displays the sales amount, which the employee basically the total sales amount that the employee has done in the company. The photo view is the picture of each employee. So whichever employee you will select, their image will be displayed. Apart from that, we've also used 5 buttons. Each of the button connects to a main activity, which executes a SQL query. The last button just exits from the activity entirely. Moving on to the code, we've imported some packages which were required for the implementation. We have set up 5 button objects for our buttons, 3 text view work objects for our text displayed. On line 42, string URL connects this activity to our JSP file info, which takes in a variable called EID. EID is basically the SSN of the employee. Next, we set up a request where the function on line 46 executes. It first displays welcome back, then it trims the string to display it to fix the display on the interface. The output is split with commas because we have multiple rows in a when the JSP file is executed. Um, test view 2 dot set text output 0 is the name of the employee. Test view 4 dot set text output 1 is the sales amount of the employee. Uh, Moving on to line 53, these are a bunch of if and else conditions. What these do is checks if the name is equal to a certain employee and sets the image accordingly. Each image has been named according to employee's name. Moving on to line 68, it is how our first button works. The intent objects makes a connection between main activity 2 and 3. The moment you click that button, it jumps to main activity 3. It takes SSN or employee ID as our input. Start activity just starts that activity. Um, the same way button 3 works, it connects to our main activity 4, taking in employee ID as our input and then starting the activity. Button 4, 5, and 6 work the same way. The sixth button uses the function called finish affinity, which exits the app entirely. We also have a public void on error response in case of any error and for glitches. Lastly, we add this request to a queue, passing this to Rahul to explain further about the jumps of the activities.
So moving on, we'll be taken to the main activity 3. The main activity 2 is basically like the connection page, which connects all the main activity together. As you can see, the first button here is the transaction button, and that is going to be our main activity 3 here. Once you click that, it's going to take you to this interface where it just prints transaction plainly, and then it prints the table transaction with a bunch of columns, which will be discussed further in the code itself. So main activity 3, as I said, has like two text view boxes, and we're basically getting those IDs here. And the get intent method this basically gets the EM, which is the SSN from the main activity 1. And then this is our URL, which basically connects to the transaction.jsp file and taking in SSN as the input. And this is the queue itself, and setting the first text box here to transaction. This line is going to do that, and this is a request. So if we get a response, we're going to go inside this function, which is basically going to like print, format that into like this format. So we're going to get like just the columns, just the outputs, and followed by hashtag. So to print it out, we need to like tidy the data. So what I've done is like basically created the column names here, and then closing and opening the column names here. And the next one is just to tidy the data using the trim function. And then we're splitting the rows by using the hashtag button here. The hashtag basically differentiate each buttons here. I'm sorry, the rows here. And then going on, we're using the for loop next to go inside each of the rows and get those values. And the columns are differentiated using a comma here. And basically that's going to have tax ID, date, and amount. The temp variable used here basically is for the date component, because the date component is essentially giving us a date and along with the timing itself. But the time is basically useless for our application here. So we're basically omitting it and then splitting it by the space itself. And the date and amount is taken, we're adding that to the output string itself, and then we're closing the output string. And then we're setting that output to the text view itself. And the next one is going to be next one is going to be main activity 4, which is going to be the second button following the main activity 2. The main activity 4 is basically, the interface is going to be this one, where it has a spinner component, which basically prints a tax IDs here. And this one, these prints the appropriate value. We'll go that in the code, and this is going to print a table basically. So in main activity 4 dot Java, we're going to have the same stuff here, basically getting those IDs, having a URL here, using the SSN as the input here, and then the spinner component needs this array list so that it can store all of the components in the array list. And then, yeah, on response, we're basically getting the rows and separating it by hashtags, and then we are using the comma to differentiate between columns, and then putting that into the spinner itself. And this basically activates the spinner, setting that, and then on selecting an item or entity in the spinner itself, this code is going to get activated. And on selecting it, we're going to get the corresponding tax ID we just selected, and then making that a string so that we can send it to the URL itself. And the URL is the request is sent, and on response, we're going to create a table name again as the previous main activity, trimming it up to and then splitting it up by hashtag at 0.5, or it can also be an int. This gave an error initially, so this was something I've changed, and the date is being into a string, and then I'm going through each of the columns, parsing that into a double, adding those values, and then adding that to the output, closing the table, and setting each of the text to the corresponding values. And then I'm adding the request to the queue itself. That's up with activity 4. And let's go to activity 5, which is basically the before last button. And that's going to be a transfer button. This transfer table is going to be a bit different when compared to the others, because this is not just getting us a value here. This is basically an insert into statement that goes through the database itself and adds the value there. And here again, we're going to get the intent object from the main activity 2 here as the emp ID, which is the SSN, sending it through the URL, and then trimming the value on response. We're trimming the result string, separating it by hashtags again, and then my bad, I've been explaining the wrong file. So this is going to be 3, 4, 5. The award details next. My bad. The award details is going to be main activity 5 here, which is just going to like print out the SSN, not print out the SSN, it's going to have a table itself. And then it's going to have the spinner attribute again. This is same as the previous activity, just by different entries, I guess. And then taking in the award ID as entry and EID as an entry, this is going to go to the granted details of JSP table. And then it's going to, again, parse the columns and then trim, taken rows and then reduce, taken columns, get the date properly, and then add that to the output string and close the table. And main activity 6 is what I said earlier, which is the transfer table, which is that insert condition rather than just a select statement. So this JSP file is a bit different, as it has like an insert statement, as I said before. This is going to take the EID, destination SSN amount. The EID here is going to be just the SSN of the employee that we first entered in the login main activity. And destination is what we entered there. As you can see the interface here. It's going to be the destination SSN, and it's going to be the amount, and this is going to just print the thing saying that it's the transfer activity, and this is the execute button that executes the transfer itself. So main activity 6, as you can see here, does the URL, gets the response, checks if it's valid or not. If it's not valid, it prints the corresponding error. If it's valid, it says transfer executed correctly. And if the transfer failed, if we don't get a response itself, we get transfer failed. So now let's try running the app itself. Rahul SEMP is going to be the username. Rahul123 is going to be your password. And then this is going to be the image I talked about, and the name of the employee and their total sales amount. Transaction is going to get us the transaction table, the tax ID, date, and amount as the columns. And transaction details is basically going to give us a spinner component with tax transaction IDs as each of the entries. As you can see, if I click, the values changes, which means we're getting response from the SQL server itself. And then going to award details again, the spinner component, the same stuff, but it's a bit different on the result part. And the transfer table is a bit different, where this, I'm going to enter the SSN, and that's going to basically enter that table, enter that value into the SQL database itself. So I'm going to add this SSN, and I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's transfer executed successfully. And then we can go back, and the exit button basically exits the app. So that's all. And my teammates are Simran, Ishmeet, and myself, Rahul. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.